The village had always warned its children never to look into the mirror after sunset. The elders spoke of an old spirit, trapped long ago, waiting for someone foolish enough to set it free. No one knew when the curse had started, only that the mirror had always been there, hidden deep inside the abandoned shrine, covered with thick vines, its glass cracked like a spider's web. One night, a young boy named Arun ignored the warnings. Curiosity had always been his weakness. The stories fascinated him more than they frightened him. How could a simple reflection be dangerous? Spirits lived in the wind, in the trees, in the rivers, not inside a mirror. He had to see it for himself. The shrine was silent, its air heavy with forgotten whispers. The moonlight barely touched the ground as Arun stepped inside, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The mirror stood at the center, taller than a man, its silver frame covered in dust. It looked ordinary, just like any other piece of glass. But as he stepped closer, something felt wrong. He took a deep breath and looked into it. His reflection stared back. Same dark hair, same wide eyes, but something was different. He couldn't tell what, but his skin prickled as if someone was standing right behind him. He turned quickly. Nothing, just the empty shrine. He let out a nervous laugh. The stories had gotten to his head. Then his reflection blinked. His stomach dropped. He had not blinked. His body stiffened as he watched his own face in the mirror, unmoving, breath shallow. His reflection tilted its head a fraction too late, as if trying to match his movements but failing. His hands turned ice cold. Slowly, the reflection's lips curled into a small, unnatural smile. Arun did not smile. He took a step back. His reflection did not. A wave of nausea hit him as the figure in the mirror stepped forward. The glass did not crack, did not break. It rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. Then, the voice came, soft and whispering. "Let me out." The shrine doors slammed shut, and Arun realized he was no longer looking into the mirror. The mirror was looking into him. Arun's breath hitched as the air around him grew thick, pressing against his skin like unseen hands. His feet refused to move, though every instinct screamed at him to run. The reflection, no, the thing inside the mirror, was still smiling. But the longer he stared, the more he realized. It wasn't his face anymore. The features were the same, but something about them was off. The eyes were darker, the skin paler, the grin wider than it should have been. It was not mimicking him anymore. It was watching, studying, waiting. A chill crawled down Arun's spine as the reflection lifted a hand and placed it against the glass. He wasn't sure why, but something about the movement made his stomach churn. The shrine around him felt smaller, as if the very walls had begun closing in. Then the whisper came again. "Let me out, Arun." His heart nearly stopped. His mouth went dry. He had not spoken his own name. He staggered back, shaking his head. No, this wasn't real. It was just a mirror, a trick of the light, a story meant to scare children. But the reflection kept moving. Its hand pressed harder against the glass, its fingers curling unnaturally, stretching, bending like roots digging into the surface. The mirror groaned. The sound of cracking glass echoed through the shrine, but the cracks did not spread like normal. They pulsed, twisting and rearranging, forming symbols Arun did not recognize. The whispers grew louder. "Let me out. Let me out. Let me out." The room darkened, the moonlight swallowed by something unseen. Arun felt something brushing against his ankles, soft, cold, like fingers slithering from beneath the ground. His own shadow was shifting, stretching, crawling toward the mirror. And then the reflection moved faster. With a sharp jolt, the thing inside the glass slammed both its hands against the surface. The smile disappeared, its face twisted in frustration. "Let me out," it snarled. The glass shook. Arun snapped out of his daze. He turned to run, but his feet barely left the ground before. The mirror cracked. A sound like shattering bones filled the shrine. A gust of freezing air rushed past him, strong enough to knock him off balance. The whispering turned into laughter, a deep, hollow laugh that did not belong in this world. And then silence. Arun dared to look back. The mirror was no longer cracked, no longer pulsing, no longer holding anything inside. The reflection was gone. But Arun's shadow, stretched unnaturally against the wall, was still smiling. The silence in the shrine felt unnatural, pressing against Arun's ears like a thick fog. His chest rose and fell in ragged gasps as he stared at his own shadow, frozen in place. The dim moonlight flickered against the cracked walls, but something was wrong. His shadow was no longer his own. It stood there, its shape slightly off, as if someone else was wearing his form but didn't quite know how to move inside it. The smile, that twisted, eerie smile, was still there. A chill ran through his bones as he slowly lifted his arm. His real body obeyed, but the shadow hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Then it followed. It was lagging behind. A wave of nausea hit him. He was not alone. The mirror was empty now, but the spirit had found another way out. A rustling sound echoed through the shrine, soft at first, like the shifting of fabric, then growing into something wet, crawling, slithering. The ground beneath him felt unstable, the air thick with an invisible force. The walls pulsed as if something was breathing within them. Then the whisper returned. "You let me out, Arun. Now I will let you in." His stomach twisted as his own reflection, the one from the mirror, stepped out of the darkness. It wasn't trapped anymore. It was free. The figure looked just like him, but its eyes, they were hollow, too dark, too deep, as if they led into an endless void. Its skin shimmered like rippling water, shifting, adjusting, molding itself more perfectly with every second. Arun stumbled back, but his legs felt weak. His shadow moved first. It detached from his feet, stretching, unraveling like black ink spilling across the floor. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body wouldn't obey. Then his reflection spoke. "Go ahead. Try to leave." The shrine door was still there, slightly ajar, leading to the outside world. Arun's breath came fast, his heart hammering against his ribs. If he could just make it, he lunged forward. The second his foot hit the shrine's threshold, the world snapped. A blinding, searing cold surged through him, his vision twisting, his body stiffening, like something had grabbed him mid-step and yanked him backward. The reflection had not moved, but Arun had. His breath caught in his throat as he turned around. The shrine looked different now. The walls were darker, the air heavier, like a thick veil had fallen between him and the real world. He staggered forward, reaching for the doorway, but outside he saw himself. Another Arun, standing in the moonlight, his own body, his own face, and that Arun was smiling. The realization hit him like ice down his spine. He had not escaped. He was inside the mirror now. Arun's breath came in shallow gasps, his mind struggling to understand what had just happened. He was inside the mirror. He could see the world outside, the shrine, the trees, the moonlight, but something was wrong. The air felt dense, the colors muted, like everything was slightly distorted, rippling like reflections on water. And outside, his own body stood there. It looked exactly like him. Same clothes, same stance, same wide eyes filled with shock. But Arun knew it was not him. The reflection had switched places. It had taken his body. The fake Arun tilted his head, watching him. Then it grinned. A slow, knowing grin that sent chills crawling down Arun's spine. He banged his fists against the mirror, but the surface barely trembled. It was solid, no ripples, no cracks. No way out. Panic surged through him. "Let me out!" he screamed, his voice muffled, distant, like sound struggled to exist in this place. "You took my place. This isn't real." But the thing wearing his face only chuckled. A deep, hollow sound that did not belong to him. "You let me out," it whispered, voice eerily calm. "I am Arun now." Arun's heart pounded as the figure outside slowly lifted a hand and flexed its fingers, testing its new body. It stretched its arms, rolling its shoulders, getting comfortable in its new skin. Then it turned away from the mirror. "No, no, don't leave me here," Arun shouted, slamming his palms against the glass. But the impostor didn't look back. It walked toward the shrine door, stepping into the moonlight, walking into his life. Arun's blood turned cold. It was going to live as him. He clawed at the glass, desperate, terrified, but his fingers met only smooth, cold surface. His voice faded into silence as the world outside continued without him. Then the whispers returned. Not from the world outside. From behind him. The darkness in the mirror stretched endlessly, swallowing the light, shifting like shadows moving beneath the surface of deep water. And now something else was moving within it. Arun turned slowly, his breath caught in his throat. He was not alone in here. Something else had been trapped in this place long before him. And now it had noticed him. Arun's body stiffened as the air inside the mirror thickened, pressing against him like invisible hands. The whispers grew louder, slithering through the darkness behind him. He could not see what was there, but he could feel it. Presence. Watching. Waiting. The world outside no longer mattered. His body, his life, his name, all of it belonged to someone else now. The thing that had stolen his reflection had walked away, slipping into his place like it had always belonged. And he was stuck. The shadows in the mirror stretched, swirling like ink in water. Shapes began to emerge from the depths. Not solid, not entirely real, but there. Limbs that were too long. Fingers that curled unnaturally. Eyes that blinked from the dark. Not two, but many. The whispers turned into laughter. A deep, hollow sound that made his stomach twist. You are one of us now. The voices cooed, overlapping, each carrying a different tone. Some sharp like breaking glass, others smooth as running water. You took my place once. You all do. Arun's breath hitched. You all? His knees weakened as his vision adjusted to the darkness. He was not alone. There were others. Dozens. Their outlines flickered in and out, like old reflections trapped in broken glass. Their faces blurred, but their eyes filled with despair. Some had no mouths to scream. Others had too many. All of them had once been like him. Let me out, he gasped, stumbling back. I don't belong here. The laughter stopped. Then the shadows moved. One of the figures lurched forward, fast and unnatural. Its hollowed eyes locked onto him, and for the first time, Arun saw its face. His stomach twisted violently. It looked like him, but not completely. Its face was stretched, like a warped reflection in cracked glass. Its mouth hung open in a silent scream, its fingers twitching as if trying to grab something that was no longer there. Arun felt the weight of their existence sink into him. They had all been tricked. They had all once been real. And now, they had become part of the mirror. A cold breath touched his ear. A whisper. Now, so will you. The shadows collapsed inward. 1,000 reflections lunged at him. And then, the world shattered.